In this video, I want to talk about this lifestyle of being a gangster or gangsterism, as it's called by scholars. Why am I talking about it? Because I want to explain where this comes from and why the world um, supports it, sponsors it, and maintains it. Because a lot of folks look down on gangsterism or the gangster lifestyle, but at the same time, those same folks would not lift a finger to deal with the root that makes gangsterism possible. Why? Because they are part of the root. If they have to deal with the root, they need to deal with themselves. Well, it comes down to this. When the when the rulers of this world, who would all belong to this Greek called the Virtue of Apollo, when they plan to construct cities, they always construct cities in a paranormal fashion. You may have heard of sacred geometry, in which they use certain sharp constructions to maintain negative energy of the population, because demons feed off negative energy, as you know. So you may have heard of sacred geometry. I've spoken about that in the past. If needed, I'll make another video about it. But together with sacred geometry, they construct the city in such a way that the human beings will inhabit the city. So that means the population will be triggered to attach themselves to that place. How do they do it? The philosophy is very simple. Imagine a circle. And the circle is used as a symbol for the sun, because the Greek cults, they worship the sun god Apollo. And in a circle, you have a center. The center they call the centrum. And cent is also in Latin also refers to 100. So you have the cent in the middle and a circle around it, and the circle around it can also be 0 added to the 100 is 1000. Okay, so even the philosophy in how they construct cities refers onto the beast. They do everything for that entity, but okay. So you have the centrum, and the edge of that circle is called the periferia, or periphery in English. And with this in mind, they construct a town. So the center of the city, they're not going to design the city in the shape of a circle, because often that's not even possible. Sometimes they develop a city in the form of a star, which refers to the sun. Okay, but in some cases it's not possible. If you're in a lagoon, if you have a lagoon, for example, or you have a delta, then building things in the shape of a star or in the shape of a circle may be not feasible, or it may be undesirable. But what they do is, in the center, you have the central square. The most important buildings are in the center. That means where the mayor lives, or the postal service, the banks are all in the center. And next to the center, you have police stations, the place where the firefighters come, the hospitals. So all the important buildings are in the center. And then you build the neighborhoods. And then you also construct certain neighborhoods that are kind of out of reach from the center. Because normally when you construct a town or a city, the architects come together, and when they design the city, they make sure that all the roads connect to the center. But the art times, actually they always do this, but they do it in a covert way. They construct some neighborhoods that are sealed off from the center. Now, in practice, this implies that people that will live in that remote neighborhoods, they'll have difficulty reaching the center of the town. That means that when there is distribution of wealth or resources, those people are the last ones to receive it. It doesn't have to be that it's geographically located in a distance. It can also be, for example, that you have, I'm going to make a very quick sketch now. Let's say you have a town, okay, and this is the center, and these are all neighborhoods. What can be that this neighborhood over here, which is relatively close to the center, doesn't have good roads or good public transport. Now today they use public transport. In the far past they didn't have that, but they would construct a neighborhood that's dysfunctional on purpose in its construction. Why are they doing this? Because in daily life, sooner or later, that dysfunctional neighborhood is going to cause psychological disturbance. It goes like this. When a city is alive, people are working there, they're living there, that dysfunctional neighborhood that has been constructed that way on purpose, the people that live there are going to feel left out, and rightfully so. And then are going to complain about the fact they're left out. But because the city constructed in such a way that psychologically people get attached to the place, the folks tend to dismiss the complaints as, you guys just need to work harder, just get off your ass at work. They would say things like that. Or they would have such an attitude towards people. So over time complaining continues, rightfully so, because they are excluded. And when the lack of resources manifest, now it's obvious that people need to do something about it. But then, what are we going to do about it? To deal with the situation, the whole construction of the city needs to be done over again. That doesn't mean that they have to tear down the whole city with all the buildings. No, it just means that they need to reconstruct things. That means that folks need to comply, and it needs to be a change also in the economy of the place. Now this is something the common population don't want, because that would mean making sacrifices. And that would also imply that they need to admit that they've been proud by not admitting something was wrong with the community. So they don't want to admit that they were wrong. So they will keep holding on to this conviction that the people from that neighborhood, they're just lazy, they're just this and that. And people begin to avoid the problem. They don't want to talk about it. They look the other way, to turn a blind eye. And when this happens, the people that live in that dysfunctional neighborhood, many of them can't afford to leave, because the economy is constructed in such a way that especially that neighborhood doesn't benefit. So the people there become embittered against the rest of the people in the urban area. And in this bitterness, they tend to become resistant towards the people of that community. And once the tensions increase, the people from that neighborhood often don't get jobs, or they get hired, or they're not accepted in other places. So now they are in physical danger because their livelihood is threatened. And when this happens, there are people that will revolt. You will have especially young men that will join in groups to loot warehouses and places so that their community has food. Because if a community is starved, if a part of the community is starved, it is rightfully so for them to revolt against the established order, because the established order is failing them on purpose, and they're not, no human being in the right mind should tolerate such a terroristic regime. So they revolt. But here is the trap. When they revolt and begin looting and all of that, instead of looking for long-term solutions, often the people there, especially the young men, become stuck in a cycle. It began with them or their parents not feeling acknowledged, and this conflict has been transferred onto them. And now they have this deep-rooted insecurity, which is not normal. But to face this deep-rooted insecurity, they also need to face that they, as a group, have been victimized. Now they can admit that, but then they need to admit their own contribution, by which means they need to forfeit the hope that the society is going to accept them. They need to forfeit that hope. And that means they need to make effort to develop their own economy, or they need to move to another place, start all over again. But what often happens is that the young men in that region, they become older men, they have babies, they become socially dysfunctional, and they get used to it. And because they get used to it, they develop this narcissistic attitude that you can't address it anymore. And now it has turned into a demonic stronghold. And in these narcissistic tensions, they turn on each other. So instead of turning on the local society that maintains the disadvantage of their neighborhood or of their place, they now turn on each other. And now it's totally irrelevant that they are all oppressed, they turn on each other. And now you have those different groups that are going after each other. And why is it? That deep-rooted insecurity that's caused by society around them, instead of being seeing deliverance from it, they now relieve themselves from it with through violence. And that is what gangsterism really is. And people that grew up in a dysfunctional neighborhood, they don't know any better. They see those tough guys, those violent men. When they walk down the streets, everyone bounces back out of fright, and they begin to think that that's an effective role model. They want to become just like that. But it's when they want to emulate that behavior, they realize that the behavior is not healthy. Then many of them decide, you know what, I'm out of this. And then you have a few who are very desperate. They want to join one of those groups, or you call them gangs, no matter what. So gangsterism is the result of generational trauma. That's one thing. Secondly, the whole thing of gangsterism is the result of how a place is governed. Yes, eventually when you turn into a demonic stronghold, when those groups are willingly going after each other, yes, they are contributing to the stagnation themselves. But it didn't develop in a vacuum. It's not like out of the blue, one day they decided we're going off at each other. No. The economic and social deprivation of that part of the community is what gave rise to that darkness. Now, when it escalates in that neighborhood, they call it a ghetto. And the rest of the community looks at it and they're horrified. But if they would look at the context, they would realize that it's them as a society that keeps that thing going, because they can easily intervene, reconstruct the urban area, and force everyone to comply with the solution. They can do that. But what happens is that often people still they don't want to acknowledge what's going on. Instead, because they have the validation from society, they don't want to admit that they share in, how do I say, they don't want to take their part, and they don't want to acknowledge their responsibility for what's going on. Instead, they're going to treat the ghetto as a separate place completely, even though it's geographically close. So they now will use the ghetto as a reminder of how good they are. So they're building their esteem at the expense of people that live in the ghetto. Then you have stereotypes that are developed based on what's common in the ghetto, and everyone that comes from the ghetto, who was born there, they have two choices. Either they remain part of the ghetto, or they want to get out of the ghetto. But if they want to get out of the ghetto, often they're faced with resistance. Why? Because if someone from the ghetto can turn into someone influential with good influence, that means that everyone in that society that builds their esteem at the expense of people in the ghetto, they're now exposed what they are. They're now exposed as narcissistic enablers. They're not all narcissists, but enablers. They don't want that. So if you're from the ghetto, it's like they have a pact with demons to keep you down. Now, this gangsterism thing, it has been going on for centuries in all ethnicities. However, in modern day mainstream media, they want you to associate gangsterism with blacks. Not that much dark-skinned people from Africa, but with Negroes. They want you to think gangsta, Negro. That's what they want you to think. They don't tell you that before the 1970s, that most of the black community was functional together in a segregated way, that many blacks owned businesses, and they even, let me say this, they had their papers. And they won't tell you that back then it was mainly the Italian migrants or the Italian Americans that were into gangsterism, and that much of the violence related to the gangster lifestyle were in the Italian community. They won't tell you that. Instead, they glorify the Italian gangsterism in movies like Scarface and in video games, but the gangsterism is going on in the black community, they saturate it and say, you see, the whole black community is like this. They're all dysfunctional. They're all underdeveloped. Not true. Absolutely not. So that is how gangsterism develops, and that's how it's maintained by the world. So it's wrong to say that people from the ghetto just need to man up and fix their own issues. It's not like that, because they're part of the bigger human community over there. And the bigger human community has their collective obligations towards them. They have their obligations towards themselves and the rest of the human community, but the human community also has obligations towards them. But to acknowledge this means that people, if they still refuse to comply, they will be exposed themselves as narcissistic enablers. And they want to save face. So they have to pretend as if they are the good people and people from the ghetto are the worst of the worst. And to secure this self-validation from society, there needs to be a constructive discrimination in that society against people from the ghetto. And then you have sellouts from the ghetto. They really want to be approved by society. They will turn on their own folks. They will even speak bad about their own people just to be received acceptance by society. And sometimes they receive it, sometimes they don't, depending on the situation. But I want to repeat what I said earlier, because I want you to understand this. Gangsterism is the result of generational trauma. And there's another part of it that many don't notice, but gangsterism it's energetic homosexuality. That's what it is. It's sodomy. Let me explain. Not all people in the gangster lifestyle are attracted to the same sex, okay? I'm not talking about, it's not about sexual attraction in itself. Just think about it. You have a bunch of men who have this deep-rooted insecurity. It's not caused by themselves, okay? But nevertheless, they need to acknowledge this and seek for help. But now you have a lot of them, instead of receiving deliverance, they receive relief. And they cling on this relief. How do they receive relief? By another violent man. So they become like the females that seek validation from this big guy. That's how they become. So now their self-worth, or how they feel about themselves, depend upon the approval of this big violent man. That's why they are willing to do everything for this violent man. If the violent man doesn't like someone, they volunteer to beat that individual up. They don't care that they may go to jail. They don't even care if the boss, or in Italian call it the capo, I believe, but they don't care if the boss, as they call the individual, rewards them, or even if the boss treats them well. It can be that the boss is treating them like trash because the boss himself has that deep-rooted insecurity that he compensates for by dumping violence, dumping his frustration on others. It can be that the boss is using them as scapegoats, but because they now depend on the masculinity of that big violent man, they now take everything from that man. And then you have those who they don't tolerate the big men, only because they want to be the big man. Why? Because you have this man, so-called on the top, the boss, and he feels, he mentally remains stable by dumping frustration on the rest. So the others have to be the receivers of his negative masculine energy. Now, in a common domestic violence situation, it goes just like that. You have the husband who is out of his mind, and instead of looking for help, he beats the wife. That's how wife beaters are. The female, who's naturally designed to receive masculine energy, now receives all of his waste energy, and it makes her sick. Okay? But because she's a female, she's designed to receive and transmit, she can stand it for a while. Males, when this happens to males, if you have one male doing that to another male, automatically that male is going to want to fight back, because he doesn't want to take the role of a female to receive of an abused female to receive all the negative energy from this big man. So then you'll have all these men fight with one another because everyone wants to be on top and the rest has to be at the bottom. And this eventually leads to them sexually molesting one another. So gangsterism is energetic sodomy. That's what it is. It's a sodomite culture in which you as a man will likely be violated, whether it's mentally, emotionally, or sexually, by men who, who have a physical advantage over you because they're older. And why you violated? Because they don't want to face themselves. And then you grow up and you are traumatized, and you, unless you're delivered, you will likely contribute to the same with others. So it's a cycle of energetic sodomy. That is what gangsterism is. Now, you need to separate gangsterism from fashion styles. For example, if someone enjoys wearing big hats with long shirts, there's something wrong with that in itself. It's just wearing big hats and long shirts. Now, big hats and long shirts are associated with the black gangsterism, but you can wear big hats with long shirts and have nothing to do with gangsterism. Now, I surely do not recommend anyone to lower their trousers. Why not? Because lowering your trousers is dysfunctional for you when you walk around. You need to watch out because your trousers are lowered. But lowering trousers is not it's considered a fashion style now, but it's not really. It doesn't come from fashion. It comes from this, as mentioned before, it's energetic. Gangsterism is energetic sodomy. It comes from the inmates in jail that want to get approval from the other stronger men by offering their butts to those other men. That's where this lowering your trousers come from. In the streets, they began to think this is something honorable. It's not. Okay, so don't lower your trousers all the way to your knees. Please don't do it. You will trigger weird associations in the minds of sick people. Okay, you will attract predators. Don't do that. But about this gangsterism thing, the reason why the world doesn't want it to be solved, because for it to be solved, everyone needs to contribute to the solution. Not just those in the lifestyle, not just the ghetto and people that come from that. Everyone needs to contribute to that solution. But a lot needs to be exposed then. For example, if you have a neighborhood, let's say somewhere, okay, Chicago is a famous example, I'm in Chicago, and things are completely downwards there. Then, if the people need to work with the solution, folks are going to ask, okay, there are many more neighborhoods that have stagnation, but why, when the city received funds from the federal government to invest in town, why was there never invested in this place if no people of this town even asked for investments? And here's another thing. There are many folks from this place that have good resumes, but are rejected on jobs in the same town. How is that? So when you begin to talk about a solution, the skeletons in the wardrobe, American English use clause about, okay, the skeletons in the wardrobe are exposed. And folks don't want this to happen. So they'll rather put up with killings in the streets than with the annihilation or the killing of their self-validation or their ego. That's the root of it. So what do you do about gangsterism? You see it for what it is. It's a culture of energetic sodomy. That's what it is. That doesn't mean that everyone involved in there has same-sex attractions. No, it just means that it's a culture in which the men cannot function as men. They are forced to function as battered women, but they don't realize they operate like battered women. And because there is income from the drug trade or human trafficking, and they wear thick necklaces, expensive jewelry, or designer clothes, that compensates for the violation of masculinity. Because in this gangsterism thing, you're violated, and you don't want to feel violated. That's why you compensate this sense of violation, which is factual because you've been violated, often before you even had the chance to defend yourself, to look for a defense, to compensate for the sense of what I said again, to compensate for the sense of hold on. Violation. Sorry, I just forgot for a moment what I was saying. To cover this up, they compensate it with external riches, expensive cars, a lot of hoes, they call it. Or they are part of a clique and they're all very angry with one another. It's compensation to hide the sense of violation that your inner alarm and your brain gives off to warn you that you've been violated. That's what it is. One way those men also cover that sense of being violated is by covering themselves with tattoos. That's why in those street gangs often everyone that's part of the gang gets many tattoos or many piercings. Why is that? Because to be part of the gang, you need to be violated and you need to accept violation of your manhood, of your masculinity, as part of. You have to accept it as a norm. But naturally, as a human being, as a human male, your body and your mind doesn't get along with this. So this tension needs to be relieved, and that's why you have all these compensatory behaviors, which are addictions. I hope this video opened your eyes about gangsterism, what it is, what it isn't, and what the root of it is. So the way to solve gangsterism is to be free from the yoke of society, because gangsterism is the result of the yoke of society. So to fight gangsterism, that will be using one type of violence, which is filthy, to get rid of another type of violence, which is also filth. So you're using filth to get rid of filth. You're still left with filth. You need to be renewed in your mind and to be delivered from the thinking patterns that society conditions you into. And that's why believers are told not to conform to the patterns of this world. Because gangsterism is the result of the patterns of this world. And gangsterism is kept alive by the world so that they can preserve their self-validation. That's what it's all about. They don't want to face their narcissistic tendencies. They don't want to face the predators around them. They don't want to face the demonic spirits that are attached to them. They don't want to face their Jezebel spirits. They don't want to face their obsessive behaviors. They don't want to face their selfishness. They don't want to face anything. They don't want to face difficulties in daily life. So it's easier to feel better at the expense of an impoverished or a neglected group of people, even if many of them turned into reprobates. It doesn't matter, still neglected by the rest of the community, so that's still wrong. But it's easier to feel better at the expense of the scapegoats or a scapegoat region or a scapegoat group than it is to face yourself. So eventually it comes down to this. Many folks, I don't care about skin color or background, many folks prefer killings in the streets. As long as it doesn't disturb their daily routine too much, they prefer killings in the streets than them being dealt with. Why do you think that when Christ healed that demon-possessed man at Gadara, that was possessed by a legion of demons, why do you think that after the demons left and there was a big chaos with the herd of swine, and the herd of swine died, why do you think that after that happened, the people from that community wanted Christ to leave? Why did they beg him to leave their place? Because they saw that Christ dealt with a dysfunction that Christ dealt with a dysfunction that was the result of their neglect. So now they realize the next step is Christ dealing with them. So now they wanted Christ away so they could remain in their darkness. So gangsterism is not something that exists on itself. It doesn't have any way to sustain itself. It's sustained by society, even though most of the adherents of society would never admit this. Well, that's it for now. Keep agreeing with Christ and be at peace.